So it's Pete again, and this is a little bit of further introduction. Like I said in the intro video, I hope to make no super long videos, but I might make many short ones. And that way, based on the title, you can decide whether you want that bit of information or not. So this one is about giving some further background on myself. And unabashedly, I'm going to piggyback here on a guy named Paul VanderKlay. I mentioned him once already, and he hopefully piggyback on his fame as a shortcut kind of to introducing myself. If you don't know who he is, you can look up his channel. I have it linked, and you can find some of that out. So I, like him, am a pastor by calling, by vocation. I had the same training he did. I was raised in the same denomination he was, although I am in the Canadian contingent of it, and he was raised in the US contingent, although a particular flavor of it as well. In fact, that aspect is part of what brings us to some of our similar thoughts and approaches. So I'm a pastoral colleague of pastor and YouTuber Paul VanderKlay. Some call him the pastor of YouTube. I'm unabashedly piggybacking on his renown to leverage my own. If you know him, you can think of me as a Canadian version of him. Where he is rabbinical and into history and can wax philosophical on the flow state of a river, I'm probably more psychosocial or relationship or relation oriented, and I can wax almost to Pauline lengths on the complexities of human relationship and human behavior. Like Paul, I'm a father to 5 kids. I'm an excitable person. I tend towards what we call ADD, although being somewhat of a contrarian, I think that's actually an anxiety or excitement disorder rather than what most of what it's made of in our society. And I'm also a third culture kid and the son of a pastor. So those are some of the similarities and differences. By third culture kid, I mean if you were raised a substantial part of your childhood in a culture that was different than the one you were born into, and then return to the culture you were born into, you won't fit that culture in the same way. And so you have a mixture of those cultures. You see things that others that don't ever get out of that culture don't see. And so that's often in shorthand referred to as a third culture kid. So preacher's kid, missionary kid, is army brat are other ways of saying the same thing. And that's part of what has made me who I am, in the sense that I moved a lot as a child and even as an adult. And so I have a whole lot of experience of coming into a new community and trying to figure out how things work there. That's developed, I would own, some of my analytical ability in sociological stuff. My undergraduate degree before I went to seminary was in the social sciences, in the humanities as they call them, and by nature I seem to have done quite well in those. So Paul and I know each other. We've known of each other for a long time. We've only been in the same room maybe twice, usually at a conference together. We've had a couple of various conversations. And so we know that we think alike on a lot of things, and particularly what Jordan Peterson's phenomenon means to our culture and also to the church itself, which I've hinted at in other places. Whatever high number Paul achieves in ranking in being pastoral or gracious or hospitable, I achieve that number in provocativeness. In fact, a member of my Meetup group says my middle name is provocateur. And I've learned to own that for myself. It's been a struggle much of my life because I have a knack for asking provocative questions that rattle people, but I'm just looking for meaning, for the value behind things. So Paul and I differ in that, and I'm exaggerating it to some degree just to try to be funny. But we are different in that aspect. And you can see hints of that difference in a video conversation we had in September 2019. That's up on his channel that I have linked. It was actually interesting for me to re-watch that today on many different levels. As you can tell from that video, I love story, and I have stories to tell, many, many stories. In fact, once I start telling stories, I've had to learn some strength in putting the brakes on that. I even have people that I've asked for help, as if it's an addiction, a compulsive storytelling, where in some circles I've given people permission, I've given them a code word or a signal by which they can tell me, we think everybody's heard this story before, Pete. Because then I can abbreviate it and go on to another story. So these stories all illustrate things that I've learned, or learned from, or been part of my learning. Neither Paul nor I are too propositional statement oriented. We were raised in a time when that was super important, and there is value in it, but we're pretty oriented to story and other ways of exploring and saying things. Currently, one of the projects that has flowed out of his Meetup group, and so this is very relevant today, it just happened in the last few weeks, and his other Jordan Peterson related activities, is a space, I'm going to refer to it as, called Estuary. And you can look at his own channel to learn more about that, or you can ask me to elaborate and I'll give you my own opinion of it. Again, the video conversation we had a year ago has a hint of this already in it, where we struggle with this question of, for both of us, it started when Jordan Peterson started doing lectures on the Bible. And people were paying, remember, we're pastors, right? And we're always looking for ways to get people into the church. An exaggerated statement. Neither of us are like that, at least not in gimmicky senses. But why are people not coming to us, the place of good news? And so when he starts lecturing on the Bible, and people are paying big bucks to come and hear him, and he's selling out lecture halls in an area where there were maybe within a couple of kilometers at least 6 big churches you could attend for free that had similar messages. Well, for both him and I, that was a moment where we started going, okay, maybe there's something to learn here just in that phenomenon alone. There is interest in the Bible and its contents, and Peterson tapped into that. So all that as a lead into saying, I consider this Meaning Quest meetup to be an estuary place. And then finally, because so many people will have ideas in their head about, and maybe even fears, or maybe even wounds in their minds, on their minds, because I've referred to myself as a pastor, I need to assure you that again, neither Paul nor I are a pastor in the sense of being used car salesmen who want to close the deal for Jesus. And there are theological reasons why we take that approach. But that's very different than what most people experience as a pastor. And so I want you to know that as part of this introduction, that you won't experience that from me. Again, if you want to know more, write a comment and I'll do a video just on that thought. But this one's gotten long enough already, and so I'm going to stop it here and get it ready for posting.